None of the content on this or any episode of the Kratom Science Podcast, Kratom Science Journal Club, or on any pages of the website kratomscience.com should be considered medical claims or medical advice. This is the Kratom Science Journal Club with Dr. Jonathan Cachet, neuroscientist and expert in psychopharmacology. In each episode, we discuss an article in a peer-reviewed journal. I'm your host, Brian Gallagher, blog and social media writer for KratomScience.com, your source for all things Kratom. This is a study from 2019. It was published in the Journal of Analytical Toxicology. It's called The Trouble with Kratom, Analytical and Interpretative Issues Involving Mitragynine or Mitragynine. That's what they call it at the University of Florida. They say mitragynine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I think it's either. We have to have... there has to be like a Kratom summit or a Kratom summit where we all decide on how to pronounce these things. So this is a team from, what's the lab called? NMS Labs in Horsham, Pennsylvania. And it's a team of toxicologists and also some people from North Carolina, including Justin Brower, who I just watched him give a talk on the myth of fentanyl exposure. It was a police officer response to drugs, so there was a lot of police on the webinar. I should have written down what the group was called, but I think it was a group out of North Carolina, but he's in Raleigh, this Justin Brower, and he's on Twitter. He's a toxicologist, but he gave an excellent talk on the myth of fentanyl exposure. There's a lot of police who believe that if you touch fentanyl, it can be absorbed through the skin, and you can get high or overdose on it. So there's a lot of fear around that, and he put some of those concerns to rest.
Yeah, so that's super interesting because I've had a similar experience, not with fentanyl. So during grad school, we had the DEA Schedule 1 through 4 license, so we had all sorts of things going to and fro. We had 2 different buildings that we worked in. I won't give his name, but he was the closest lab tech. He went to undergrad, who I knew was really good at chemistry. I called him up. He came out and he started working in the lab. So one day he's either going home or going somewhere, and on his body are some cannabis and then also a small test tube of like liquid in it that purportedly has LSD in. Okay. So he's driven to this place many times. It's at night. He's been known to be a crazy driver, but essentially what had happened to him was 2 police cars came flying out of the side street into the main street, such that like one car got to the front of him and he sort of had to slam his brakes to slow down to not hit that cop. And then the car behind him didn't notice it either. So the back cop, the cop rear-ended him. So now they got to get out and address this guy and talk about what happened. And everyone's, not really worried about how the accident went down. And they must have said something to him like, do you have any cannabis in the car? Because they got the cannabis and they go, we know. Then they start getting into those games where it's like, oh, we know this isn't all your cannabis. Like, go get the rest of it and do that stuff. And you got to think that he has a little tiny jar that's screwed in and it just looks like a clear formula. Like there's no way visually to confirm whether or not there is actually lysergic diethylamine in this vial. Like he knows it's there.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if this is, a testament to his honesty and character, or he was just dumb. But when they were searching his car, one of the cops grabbed the glass and said, "What's in here?" And he said, "That's LSD." And the cop immediately started freaking out, like freaking out. I think I got some on me. I think I'm going to be insane for the rest of my life. Like a complete, total panic attack. And my buddy who was in the interaction with the cops like this, he's like, dude, I've never been sitting in the back of a cop car having them look up on Erowid use reports on LSD because they have no idea what they're talking about, like at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
And gosh, it's just so funny. I mean, with the fentanyl, there's I think some truth to that. With LSD, there's obviously not, but no one talks about it very much, so they don't really. I could see how cops would have that, but it seems to be the guys on that side of like drug education, right? Like they're telling kids to hate drugs so much they start hating them themselves. Maybe we need to lay off. But ultimately, Brian, that all after that whole entire story, when he got his follow up from the court. He had a charge for like some just minor weed amount of cannabis that eventually just got dropped.
Yeah.
And that was it. Is that interesting? So they didn't say anything about the LSD or whatever.
Yeah.
And it basically just comes down to the fact that the highway patrol, like these highway patrol drug labs, only have the instrumentation that they bought and are trained to use. And 80% of the stuff coming through the door is cannabis. So they'll get their best tested cannabis, but they had no way of testing if there was LSD in there or not.
Oh,
so they
shit.
just never brought it up again.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. I didn't realize that. Is that a current thing?
Our lab would have got the call.
Yeah, oh yeah. I assume they test for like, heroin, opiates, cocaine, marijuana, but not LSD or mushrooms because they're so infrequent.
If you're not going to charge somebody, if you're not going to go through with a prosecution, there's no need, right?
Yeah. And so what Justin Brower said was basically you can only ingest fentanyl through your mouth, your eyes, your nose. And he even brought up a case where a guy put a bag of fentanyl up his butt because he didn't want to get caught, and it actually broke, and it was everywhere, and it got all over everybody and all the cops that were searching him, because they actually did search him there. I think he was arrested, and nobody got high. I mean, maybe the guy got a little high, but that was the idea. It was like you can't. He said he was going to hold fentanyl's hand for the talk, but he said he couldn't get any type of legal clearance to do that, and he's presenting to a bunch of cops, so it probably wouldn't have been a good idea. But it was a good presentation, and I'm just worried for anybody that buys heroin on the street. There's going to be fentanyl in it, so you have to be very careful of
100%
underground powders.
Especially at this point, the days of Yorn are very, very long gone, and it's just like, I think at least the people that didn't die who were still around, this like very real chance, 100% chance you don't know what you're getting, and very real chance that you are getting like it's kind of like acid, isn't it? We're talking about micrograms of mass in order to get an effect, and so if a guy's mixing this in a Lowe's plastic garbage can, you think he just sort of like opens a baggie and just taps it in real quick and just gives it a good stir with his oar and calls it a day? Like the room for variance and error there scares me far, 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 far too much. But another thing that changed was how quickly the cartels started getting fake press pills and were pressing them to look like it. It's unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
Yeah. There's a podcast I listen to called Tuesdays with Stories. It's these two comedians, Mark Norman and Joe List.
Mark Norman and Joe List.
Yeah.
Come on now.
I love it.
I was just listening to Norman's special.
Nice. He's awesome. I love him. I still haven't seen him yet. I saw Joe List open for. We went out to Akron actually, and I saw him open for Louis C.K.
Well,
that's the first time I saw Joe List, and then I found that they had a podcast. But anyway,
he's playing in Columbus. He's playing in Columbus on the 18th this weekend.
Oh, really?
I'm gonna go, I think.
He asked the guy at the club at a show he was playing. He said, "Can you give me a couple of Xanax? I have insomnia. I didn't sleep very well." He gave him these 2 green pills, and that he thought were Xanax. And he said he took them, and he just passed out and could not wake up. He was like waiting to get into his hotel room, and he passed out in the lobby, and they couldn't wake him up. And he said it ended up being Green Hulks, which are fentanyl. They're like pressed pills.
I think I heard that one. Yeah, I think I heard that one.
Which is
pretty
wild
crazy. World out there.
So this paper is about kratom toxicology and mitragynine toxicology. Kratom is relatively safe. We know that, but I just want people to know that you can have a toxic event on kratom. If you can get water toxicity, then you can get toxicity with anything. I just want people to realize that. Like if you went out and got a case of shots and you did them one after the other, you're getting into dangerous territory.
If you want to take it to the furthest extreme, it is water is toxic if you have too much of it, meaning you fall into a lake and you can't swim, water's toxic.
Yeah.
And so everything has its limits. Nothing should be done in excess. But in terms of its abuse potential or addictivity or hardness of a drug is very similar to that of like chocolate, caffeine, or cannabis. I wouldn't say it's any worse than that.
The point I've been bringing up is, if people are eating, like, grinding up like a pound of coffee and trying to eat as much of it as they could possibly eat, they would probably die sooner than if they did that with kratom, or they would have liver toxicity sooner, because caffeine, as it is a pretty toxic pound for pound substance in coffee. It's more toxic than mitragynine, according to some couple of mouse studies. But we all know how to do coffee. It's in our culture. It's so ingrained that people don't even realize how toxic caffeine can be. I mean, I know somebody, I have a friend who drank like 4 pots of coffee a day and she ran into health problems. But I just want people to know that just because kratom is relatively safer, can be habit forming if you're not careful, and it also can be toxic in high doses.
Like generally your GI tract and your stomach, you get a little bit nauseous. But I know that I've always taken too much, and it seems to be pretty widely discussed on the internet, this thing called wobbly eye. It just seems like you're having a hard time keeping your vision focused, and like literally like your eyes are wobbling back and forth. And so that's a clear indication that you shouldn't be consuming anymore. Give yourself a night's sleep or 24 hours. The difference between opiates is that when you take too much, you stop breathing.
Okay, so here we go with this paper. It's called The Trouble with Kratom, Analytical and Interpretive Issues Involving Mitragynine, Journal of Analytical Toxicology. Here's what they did. Over the course of 27 months, 1,001 blood specimens submitted to our laboratory tested positive for mitragynine using a sensitive and specific LC.MSMS method. Concentrations range from 5.6 to 29,000 nanograms per milliliter in the blood. So they're just looking at all these mitragynine blood samples, and some of them involved deaths, most of them didn't. I think all of the deaths were polysubstance use, except for the one with 29,000 nanograms per milliliter. That was, I think, a mitragynine intoxication, and this person may have been trying to commit suicide, because you would have to consume a lot. They probably drank a ton of extracts or something like that. Sadly,
got dehydrated and died.
And they even took that one out to get a better, average or something. It was like an outlier. It says the highest reported mitragynine blood result from the original data set is 29,000 nanograms per milliliter. Stems from a post-mortem case where the report was issued 60 days after sample collection. So, 29-year-old male, packages of kratom products labeled Mangda kratom power, 60 grams. Mitragynine speciosa, kratom SEM, 20 grams. The Mangda powder doesn't seem like what did it, unless he probably took a bunch of kratom at a small time. He also had an e-cigarette with methamphetamine in the cartridge.
Left and right.
Yeah, so actually, literally all these were polydrug deaths, but it wasn't 1,001 deaths. It was from DUI cases. You were just talking about the eye wobbles. There was a DUI case, 39-year-old man who got the eye wobbles while he was driving, so he was unable to focus and he was swerving, and they pulled him over. So it's good idea maybe not to drive until an hour or so after you take kratom, or if it's particularly high dose, or if you get one of those shots and chug the whole thing, you might get eye wobble, so it might prove to be dangerous for driving. But
do drugs for the first time in a safe environment where you have everything you need and you don't need to go anywhere. Drug use 101. Preferably with someone who's done it before.
If you've never had coffee before, I would say don't drive right after coffee, even though it's perfectly fine for driving, and usually Kratom is too, but, you might get a little
startle reflex.
Surge of energy and floor it in a residential area or something. They basically just looked at all these cases and they were trying to get some kind of conclusion out of it. I found a mistake in the introduction. It says mitragynine is reportedly 13 times more potent than morphine. That was wrong.
Telephone game.
Yeah. I looked at the references. They put 3 references after that. The only one that was open access, the one I looked at, I'll quote from that article where they reference, its potency is 1/4 that of morphine. That's what they say about mitragynine. They also say in this article that they referenced 7-hydroxymitragynine, a minor constituent of M. speciosa, was found to exhibit high potency to opioid receptors, approximately 13 to 46-fold higher than morphine. That's 7-hydroxy, and we've always said that about that. Dr. McCurdy said it's pretty strong. The number 8 reference is a study on 7-hydroxy, so I don't think there's any comparison of mitragynine to morphine in that. Reference 9 is kratom extract in mice. There's no mitragynine to morphine comparison in the abstract, so I think they just made a mistake. So mitragynine is not, I don't think, 13 times more potent than morphine. It's like what their reference said, it's a quarter potent.
And we just called that into question, I think, in the last paper too, whether or not that was just sort of a boogeyman, right?
Yeah.
And I'd also just like to commend you. For the last few years now, we've been hearing a whole lot of do the research. You go do your own research.
Yeah.
Well, Brian just gave a very good example of what real research actually is, where you evaluate the cited references of somebody trying to make a statement and see if their statement accurately reflects the sources, not go look for more sources that agree with the point you're trying to do. Good job, Brian.
Yeah, thanks. I'm doing science here. I can't believe it. Yeah, and so basically, like, these are a list of case reports. Each report mostly involve polydrug use. I've been looking for an article. I'm doing a liver toxicity article, and every single case report I find, either the person has fatty liver disease and they don't know it, or somebody was taking like 3,500 milligrams of Tylenol a day. But the issue, I think, is, the question is, does mitragynine increase the effects of other drugs, which I think there is a concern for that. It could slow the metabolism of other drugs. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a few angles to think about that in, and it's valuable to bring that up. I mean, it doesn't, in and of itself, it is a molecule that binds to a receptor site in the synapses on neurons. It's not something that does enzymatic degradation itself. It has to be degraded by enzymes that are presumably also degrading other things. And so it could also, just keep dopamine levels elevated or serotonin levels elevated to where you're not like depressed and feeling bad. But then you're also taking like antidepressants, which do the same thing. So you could add some compounding effects there, which get dangerous if it's, reaching neurocytotoxic levels. But I think we're just now getting to like actually hone in on what the LD50 is. And if there were any very clear deadly interactions, we certainly would have known of them by now.
33-year-old male found in the bathroom after drinking 10 plus malt drinks, which I don't know what a malt drink is. Maybe it's kratom tea or
malt milkshake?
Malt liquor. He took 2 Adderall, history of alcohol and prescription drug abuse, no non-prescribed meds found at the scene. This other guy had a history of back injury, prescribed methadone and gabapentin. I think there was some where it said, they're not taking a strong amount of the other substance. And so the question is, does mitragynine increase or slow down the metabolism if they're not taking a strong amount of the other substances. And there's also a concern that there are some companies that are taking 7-hydroxy extract and sprinkling it on the regular powder just to get people addicted, which that should be, outlawed. And some of these new KCPA laws are saying that, you can't have more than 2% of alkaloids of 7-hydroxy, given that it probably is 13 times more powerful than morphine on the opioids, but there's only trace amounts of it in regular kratom.
Yeah, so I actually ran into that. I was over in DC this weekend, and it's weird to see, CBD and kratom have basically made it to every gas station counter there is, which I think there's some interesting sort of how fast that occurred. Is pretty interesting. But, back in the day, or the one most widely reported one that's sort of like kryptonite, they did an analysis and they found, I think, codeine and some other drugs. So it was adulterated, not necessarily with more 7-hydroxy, right? That type of manufacturing procedure is what we do with the Delta 8 and Delta 10 stuff, right? We extract it like that and then add that back in. In this case, it was codeine and other sort of like research chemical opiates, which are more dangerous. And so I told the guy about it and he didn't really do much. And I'm like, you need to take these off the shelf and throw them away. These are like known contaminated products that people can get really sick on. Not to mention they taste like shit. So get rid of these things.
What were they? Which product? Which they were extracts?
Krypton.
Really? Somebody was selling Krypton. Wow.
I haven't seen it in a while, but yeah, Krypton, and it was a little liquid.
Is that with the O-desmethyltramadol in it?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even know they were still selling that. That's like 9 people in Sweden died of it. There has been reports in Denver of people selling tianapatine. Is that how you pronounce it? And also phenibut as kratom. So there's like an extract, tianapatine and phenibut, which are both more dependency potential than kratom itself, or even a kratom extract. So people have been selling those as kratom, which is why some of these laws I agree with. I just think there should be an alkaloid profile. People should definitely know what they're putting in their body, and whoever sold it like that, I think, should be prosecuted, or at least fined and not allowed to sell that anymore, because it's, I don't know, kratom works on its own, quality kratom, and it's very mild, and it's beneficial for most people. And I want to look at these toxicology things because I want people to be safe and not become addicted, and so addicted that they're chugging down, a pound of kratom in an hour and having a toxic reaction. So what they looked at, which was really weird, I'll just read. Although most reports of mitragynine-related fatalities include other drugs, there have been instances where other drugs and drug concentrations were determined to be insufficient to cause death. Many of the deaths involve autopsy findings consistent with opioid toxicity, including pulmonary congestion, cerebral edema, and urinary retention. Blood mitragynine concentrations of 230, 600, and 1,060 nanograms per milliliter have been reported in cases where other substances were found to be insignificant or did not explain the autopsy findings, which were often consistent with opioid use. Conversely, there are some reported cases where an elevated mitragynine concentration was detected. However, the cause of death was unrelated to the ingested drugs. Mitragynine confirmed at a concentration of 980 nanograms per milliliter in a case where the individual died from asphyxia. Mitragynine concentrations were all over the place on the chart, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint, like, this is how much it'll kill you, and this is how much combined with another drug that'll kill you, and it's just because they're all over the place. It's really hard to come to some definite conclusion.
Well, and that's in psychopharm. That's why you have to do these LD50 studies, right? So you're not going to find people. LD50 stands for a lethal dose when taken by up to 50% of the subjects you're giving it to, they die. So the dose in which 50% people start dying. So you obviously can't do that with humans for a number of reasons. So they have to do it with the smaller animals. And so it's different. It looks like, it was in mice, 22 milligrams per kilogram. Let's assume someone is roughly 150 pounds or 68 kilograms. It would take 32,500 milligrams to reach the LD50 of mitragynine. So you'd have to take 500 milligrams, which would be 100 capsules.
Yeah. Of pure mitragynine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there was this other issue of the diastrometers. Is that how you pronounce that?
The chromatography machines, the actual analytical chemists?
Yes.
Well, let me tee this up then just for a little bit too, because I think everything that we've been talking about thus far has sort of been on par for the course. A statement is made about the uncertainty regarding its safety. They want to go out and figure out what that safety level is. And so they're proceeding like any other like psychodynamics study would. However, either these guys are in the analytical chemistry department and have been working with the other teams in Florida working on Kratom. But ultimately, I think the real message and point of this paper is that if you're going to be studying Kratom and you're studying these micro concentrations, you want to quantify a very small amount of how much is it in your sample, much like we're doing with the medical cannabis products here in Ohio. What is the THC level exactly? You have to go through something called method validation. And method validation can take anywhere from a month to 3.5 years. And the less that's known about what you're validating to do, the longer it takes usually. And it also just depends on how anal your chemist is. But the purpose is the method that we've implemented successfully quantifying the target compounds we say that we're supposed to be targeting. And so there's a bunch of details that came up, but I just wanted to give people that context before we start getting into the nitty gritty of analytical chemistry, because I can tell you this, they're very much right. You have to make sure that what you're measuring is representative and accurate to because those numbers that you're reporting then become basically the law and Bible, and they can't just be like you're not throwing darts at a dartboard here.
I'll read it. The stability of mitragynine in biological specimens also needs to be assessed to understand how delays in time between specimen collection and sample analysis may affect the reported concentrations. Since the result of toxicological tests and forensic cases are used to interpret the potential lethality of a concentration, it is imperative to understand if any intoxicant concentrations such as mitragynine change between sample collection and analysis. Now that's just time.
Shelf life.
Yeah. They say it's 30 days in a freezer, and
it looks like a freezer is the best. It will stay good. The concentrations will remain unchanged if kept in a freezer. But around day 30, 40, if you have it at room temperature with some amount of light protection, you're going to, you're starting at 16 nanograms per milliliter, and starting at around day 8, by the time you get to day 31, you have gone from 60 nanograms per milliliter down to 2 nanograms per milliliter, which is very interesting. And I'm unaware of any vendors or retailers that are aware that how sharply this occurs. Makes sense why the people that are doing the fresh flower, like sort of right from the source, say that it's different.
And so the other situation was and I might even play the clip. I might even add in the clip later of Dr. Abhishek Sharma, who's on the show, and he brought this up to me, that the other alkaloids are so similar. They're so similar to mitragynine that it's all been quantified as mitragynine. So in a lot of these toxicological reports, they think all these 4 alkaloids are mitragynine, so they're saying that there's more in the blood than there actually is. So I'll just read the Sharma interview. He said, if you look closely at mitragynine, speciogenine, speciociliatine, and mitraciliatine, by normal eyes you cannot find the difference. You need like really good eyes to find the difference. So these four molecules are diastereomers. So if I'm using, for example, quadruple mass spec to analyze my mitragynine, and the chromatography is not good enough to separate these four, mitragynine, speciogenine, speciociliatine, mitraciliatine, I will quantify all these as mitragynine. And I asked him, did that have any effect on the toxicity studies and the autopsies of people who had mitragynine in their blood? And he was like, yes. Like, he said it like that. Yes.
Of course it did.
Yeah, he's like, there's a possibility of many of the studies, when you look at chromatograms in different reports, you will see only one peak. This is possible when I'm taking mitragynine only, but if I'm taking a Kratom product, then I should have all four diastereomers in my system. So if he's not seeing four peaks in the chromatogram, all four quantifies mitragynine. So it either means, like, many of the reports, they're showing that there was more mitragynine than's actually there, but does it mean that it's toxic at lower doses than what they were finding, or does it mean that didn't account for the death at all and they're overestimating it?
I would say that, well, let's start at the beginning. So, because I found the paragraph you're on. There are 20 different alkaloids in Kratom, but all have the same core structure and have 3 different chiral centers. And so, for those of you who haven't taken chemistry and understand this word chiral, they always have you look at your hands. You have a left and you have a right hand. And in certain parameters, you can put one hand on top of the other and they line up perfectly because they're the exact same conformation. But if you put one of your hands, and if you flip them over with your hand, the palms down, and then you put them over each other, the thumbs stick out the side. And so an enantiomer is a mirrored like twin of a compound, but because of the way the strong and weak forces of the atoms are holding it together, they're in different conformations. And it's been a very active bed of research. And I know that in ADHD medications, for example, the stimulants, there are the L and the R enantiomer of amphetamines. And I think that there was about a decade there where they were pulling L out because they thought L was responsible for like the jitteriness, the loss of appetite, the sort of unwanted side effects, whereas the right one actually achieved the goals with ADHD. And so that was a hypothesis. I would say, now, what does that mean for us, and what does that mean for the numbers that are currently on the market? Well, I don't know. I defaultly respond to that question as a social scientist and compare it to cannabis, in that, like, no matter what the scientists are doing, there are a large amount of people consuming this on their own, and they're not dropping dead like flies. So to say that somehow, like, before, well, we do the science and now it's unsafe. Well, no, everybody's always been consuming it like that. It hasn't been unsafe then. Just because we know this now, it doesn't mean that it's unsafe. But it does mean, so I don't find it to be like an enormous public health risk, but it was about time someone had to come out with this paper to say, like, whoa, guys. Like, finally, real anal analytical chemists got involved in measuring this. And like, what about all these other spikes, fellas? What's this all about? And in a very analogous way, the state has sent us letters now that in all the medical cannabis products in Ohio, we're going to have to test for THC 8, THC 9, and THC 10.
Wow.
And they're obviously so close to each other that it's going to be a real, like, technical hurdle to overcome to be able to do that accurately.
Yeah. Is it going to, like, raise the price of weed in Ohio?
God, there's no room there. Can't go up there.
Yeah, same with Pennsylvania. I even tell my friends that are heavy smokers, don't even bother getting a card because you're just going to spend more money. Like, if you go through an ounce a week, you're better off buying on the underground market.
I would disagree. I would disagree. I
Really?
would disagree. I disagree heavily. I would disagree. I would recommend anybody who is
Okay.
consuming cannabis for whatever reason to go get your medical card, because if you have your medical card and you get pulled over and you show them your medical
That's
card,
true.
they will
Yeah.
no longer ask you anything else again.
Yeah.
And it's always been that way. I mean, I got it when I moved to California immediately. There's an option there where the law says, get this card and you'll be good. So I'm getting
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, you're right about that. Yeah, it's worth it for. I spent it's initially it's $250, and I spend $150 a year. So yeah, being legal is definitely better. That's right. But
harvesting a hemp field?
financially, it sucks to actually buy legal weed for somebody who smokes heavily. But hopefully that can change. They really in Pennsylvania they needed to issue more grow licenses because the supplies was really low for a while. Now it's okay, but
Interesting. Yeah, and just because you have a card doesn't mean you have to buy there.
yeah.
Although I would say you have to at least, if you don't go get anything that first year, and you go to get your license renewed, the doctor's going to be like, "So you use this 0 times?
Yeah.
And you want another one?"
Yeah,
So
really.
be aware of that. And there's also I say some of these things in jest, but there are also, what's nice in Ohio is there are usually pharmacists or very knowledgeable people there that will probably be able to help you make decisions based on how, no matter what you're using it for, no matter how you're using it, they can help you optimize that use case more so than a guy behind 7-Eleven. So
Yeah.
prices are rough. But there are a lot of good reasons to get the medical card.
I'm just looking. Okay, just looking back at the paper. Under method, it says the following analytical method was developed, validated, and used to separate mitragynine diastereomers. Did you look at that? And do you want to comment on exactly what they're doing? And it talks about how exactly they separated the other alkaloids from mitragynine.
MRM stands for multi-residue method, and we run into this all the time with pesticides. And so in certain multiple reaction monitoring is what it stands for. Just double check that I got that right. Multiple reaction monitoring. So, okay, all chromatography machines have 2 steps. The first one is the separation phase, and it generally happens in a column. The columns can be custom designed and custom ordered if you wanted to separate molecules on pH, on size, on attractiveness to hydrophobic or hydrophilic. You push your sample through this long column, and it's going to start separating the molecules that are in there from each other. And then if you just shoot that past the detector, you're just going to start seeing the peaks emerge. So depending on how, let's say it was pH, and it was a very basic pH, so the acidic compounds went through faster. You're now going to see those start to throw spikes, and based on how long it took them to get out of the column, the retention time, as well as the peak of the spike, that's how you quantify how much of this particular molecule was in that sample. Now, when you have several, let's say we have 20 samples we're running through the chromatograph to get separation, the 5 of those are very, very similar. They're enantiomers of each other, which they're essentially the same. So they could come out and only display 1 peak, and they're together, which makes the configuration of the instrument a little bit more difficult because you know that there are 2 under there. Now, how can you separate them from each other? Mm-hmm. What most LC triple quads do is they essentially run the sample liquid through the separation, and before it gets to the detector, it goes through what's called a collision cell. And in these LC triple quads, there's 2 collision cells. And the more you look at it and the more you understand about what's going on in here, it's like these guys are building, electromagnetic sub tunnels on the Death Star. This is nuts, because what they're doing is waiting for the molecules of interest to get into this little tiny open airspace surrounded by magnets so they can hold it in there and lock it in there. And then they'll pick 1 or 2 different ways to affect it or blow it up. So let's blow it up now, and then let's push the fragments of what were left back out into the detector. And so depending on how those molecules break up and explode, you can generally use the signature from what's left after the explosion to say this peak was for 8, this peak was for 9, and 10 is, there were such low levels of 10 that we haven't figured that out yet. But you are essentially separating the ones that are very closely related by destroying them and then watching what scatters. It's like, like if we were both in there at the same time and we got this something that scattered us, you leave with your arm and your leg holding each other, and I just sort of fall off into 4 pieces. Well, you holding your leg in that confirmation means that you were a different one than what I was. So it's a little gruesome of a visual there, but I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I'm looking at the discussion now, and they're talking about the post-mortem cases, and it said 81% of cases had a result of less than 500 nanograms per milliliter. 92% of cases had less than 1,000 nanograms per milliliter, and they even say there is a need to evaluate each case individually, taking into account scene investigation, medical history, and autopsy findings. And this came out in 2019. This is 3 years ago, and I don't think they're doing that yet, as the diagnosis becomes one of exclusion. And that's the thing. We've been just getting kind of slammed with people who are in all the Kratom advocacy accounts who said, my son died of this, my husband died, it was Kratom. And I'm thinking, when I look at these, it's like they just ruled everything out. They had mitragynine in their blood, and in some cases it might have caused death, and but family members are being told in many cases it's death by mitragynine toxicity just because everything else is ruled out. Serious, drug history, and maybe they weren't using other drugs on that day, but maybe their liver was, shot to shit.
It's tough. And you see all the controversy that's come out about in terms of counting cause of death with COVID and everything too. And most people are saying the COVID numbers are overreported. I guess that would primarily be people more on the right are concerned about the government making it appear more serious or deadly than it actually is. But in my experience, actually, when I got COVID, when my wife got COVID, my father did as well. We called him first. He went and got the PCR test. He came back positive. We had already failed 2 of the antibody tests at home. So in our mind, it was, well, we've got it. Well, we'll just stay here. So we weren't even added to a list of people who got it. So there seems to be no human system is perfect, obviously. Yeah. And especially when there's the death of a child involved who had a drug problem, and teasing apart all of these various threads can be enormously difficult. And you're really just trying to provide comfort to the people who are, going through that loss. But I think this paper does bring, a very good technical problem that can be translated over to how it affects the development of our rules and regulations and our ability to actually monitor fatalities should they exist.
Yeah, I mean, and I realize there's a case of money. I mean, I think at least with this elected coroner, I could go to I've said this before, but I could go to a class and for 12 hours and become a coroner in certain states. I don't consider myself qualified to test and see what caused people to die, but on the other hand, it's better to be moderate about you putting any substance in your body, including kratom. And I just want to. If anybody's listening to this, I just want to warn people that it can be toxic, and it's tough to do it. I mean, it's just as tough as taking too much coffee. It's it just feels better to not take all that much. But I just want people to know you can't just drink a case of kratom shots and expect that you won't have some kind of at least nauseous reaction.
You're gonna have to pay your taxes, at some point. Yeah. And it's by far and large when you're on the subreddit, cruising around and people are talking about tolerance blanks instead of the other thing is it seems to be people get to the point where they're so experienced with using kratom, they're veteran kratom users, that they know that sometimes taking less is more powerful. And it's a weird, it doesn't happen all the time, but it definitely does happen sometimes. And it's, you got to fight that urge, the American, economies of never or ever growing perpetual, or more and more and more. Like more is not always better in many senses.
Yeah, and I think with this whole kratom issue, it's a chance for us to like level up on our knowledge of drugs collectively as a society, because it's all there. It's like it's it can be addicted. People can be addicted to it, and you just have to be careful. You most likely won't become addicted to it, but then that goes for other drugs, alcohol, cocaine, heroin. Most people who use those don't become addicted. Addiction's a psychological problem. It's like this issue is such an opportunity to learn about this whole drug problem, and also how they help us. It's either you can go one way or the other. Most people are having successful use. I mean, me and my wife, maybe we're once a week or twice a week. I haven't used it in a few weeks. So I would just say that, be cautious. You have to be responsible. I mean, that's why kids shouldn't have kratom.
I got something up on top here that really caught my eye. Have you ever heard of the word Medicolegal?
Yeah. I noticed that. What the hell does that mean?
It's just like, so I guess anything drugs are in the medical legal category, because it's related to
medical legal
drugs. I was trying to think of other ones we could make that would merge like
props to whoever made that word up there. That is some highfalutin academia right there. Medico legal. That's the kind of shit that would give me A on a paper in English course in college, I think. We're in the medico-legal space when we talk about cannabis. Yeah, like if I come to the Cannabis Museum and smoke cannabis, it'll be a medico-legal issue. So when do you think April 420 would be ideal, huh?
The target date's 420, but as a bunch of stoners, we're going to be a little bit past that. But the Cannabis Museum here in Athens, Ohio, is finally moving out of its private exhibition collection, and they have an exhibit space now that's going to be open to the public to come check out the collection, and there'll be like a coffee shop there, and
nice.
People will get to hang out.
Oh,
so I will. It's
past 420.
About that.
Hell yeah, I'll come.
420 is the target. This is an old building in an old mining community too, so there's like trails that go back in the woods, an old mine shaft that can be explored.
That's awesome.
They're building it all up, but they did a gutting on this thing, like brought it up to speed. And then when they came and started doing code enforcement, they're like, oh, well, what about the sprinklers? What about the security system? So they like sort of called him on all of this stuff he needed to get in. That was started this week, right? So the electrician's dog's dying. So like he's just dealing with a shitstorm of perfect events, to where he was confident 2 days ago that 420 was a possibility, and when I spoke to him today, 420 was no longer a possibility. But I would assume that we get it before the end of April. We're going to put out some announcements as a show, as a fundraising effort. But I will definitely make sure you get the details.
We'll definitely come down when it's open. Thank you, Dr. Jonathan Cachet. Check him out on social media at @JCachet. Check out the Cannabis Museum this springtime in Athens, Ohio. So far on this podcast, we don't advertise, we don't ask for money, but we do ask for your support. Please share the Kratom Science Podcast and Kratom Science Journal Club on social media. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, comment. The music is Captain Big Wheel. The song is called Moonrunner. Kratom Science Journal Club is produced by me, Brian Gallagher, for KratomScience.com. Take care.